They told me my parents left me nothing but an old rancher's diary told a different story, and what I found wasn't just about land or money, it was about the anatomy of a promise, the kind that outlives death itself. If you've ever felt like you were left with nothing, or if you've ever had to fight for a story that the world tried to erase, then stick around. This one's for you. And if these kinds of stories matter, the ones that live in the cracks of the official record, maybe take a second to subscribe. We're building a community here for people who know that the most valuable things are never the easiest to find. The day I turned 18, the world gave me a cardboard box and a handshake. That was it. No cake, no balloons, just the dry scrape of packing tape and the professionally detached smile of Mrs. Gable, my caseworker for the last decade. She was a woman built of straight lines and sensible shoes, and her kindness was a thin, starchy veneer over a core of pure, unadulterated bureaucracy. "Well, Leo," she said, placing the box on the scarred metal desk between us, "you're a man now, in the eyes of the state." Her voice was flat, a practiced monotone that had probably launched 1,000 other kids just like me out of the system and into the indifferent gravity of the real world. I didn't feel like a man. I felt like a package being mailed to an address that no longer existed. For 10 years, my life had been a series of temporary rooms, temporary families, and the permanent low-grade hum of being a guest who had overstayed his welcome. My parents were ghosts, 2 smiling faces in a single faded photograph I kept tucked in my wallet. They died in a car accident when I was 7. A patch of black ice, a sharp curve, a steep ravine. That was the official story, the one recited to me in gentle therapeutic tones until it felt less like a memory and more like a passage from a book I'd been forced to memorize. After that, the system took over. Their assets, I was told, were non-existent. A mountain of debt, a failed business venture, nothing left over, nothing for me. I was a ward of the state, a line item in a budget. I stared at the box. It wasn't large. It probably contained every physical object that tethered me to my own history. Mrs. Gable tapped a perfectly manicured finger on a stack of papers. "This is your final paperwork. Your birth certificate, social security card, a check for $250 to get you started, and a list of transitional housing resources." She slid the papers toward me. "And this." She separated a single folded document from the pile. It was old, the creases worn soft as cloth. "This was in your parents' file. It's a deed. Legally, we have to give it to you upon your emancipation." She said the word deed with a sigh, as if it were a particularly tiresome piece of junk mail. "It's for a parcel of land out in Cinder County, about 5 acres, a derelict house." She paused, her expression shifting into something that was almost pity. "Leo, I have to be clear. The property was foreclosed on years ago for back taxes. It's technically owned by the county now, but because of some procedural anomaly, the title was never fully cleared. It's worthless, it's just a piece of paper, but it was theirs, so now it's yours." A procedural anomaly. The phrase hung in the air, clinical and strange. I took the deed. The paper was thick, brittle. It listed my parents' names, David and Sarah Hale, and a plot number. Underneath, in faint typewritten letters, was the name of the property, Sparrow Creek Ranch. I had never heard of it. I looked up at Mrs. Gable, my throat suddenly tight. So they had land? It was a stupid question, but I had to ask. For my entire life, the narrative was that they had nothing. This piece of paper, worthless as it might be, was something. It was a place. "They had it, Leo," she corrected gently. "They lost it. From what the file says, they bought it and couldn't make it work. It happens. It's a sad story, but it's not an uncommon one." She pushed the cardboard box toward me. "The rest of their personal effects are in there." What little there was. I didn't move. I was just staring at the deed, at the names of my parents. They weren't just ghosts in a photo. They had owned a place called Sparrow Creek. They had tried to build something. They had failed. The story fit painfully with the narrative of my life. I was the son of people who had nothing, who left nothing behind. Finally, I reached for the box. It was surprisingly light. I opened the flaps. On top was a small, threadbare teddy bear with one button eye, a bundle of my own crayon drawings from kindergarten, and a few thin paperbacks. My things. Beneath them, at the very bottom, was a small, velvet-covered jewelry box. It was empty, except for a single, heavy, and deeply rusted iron key. It was an old-fashioned skeleton key, the kind you see in movies about haunted houses. There was no note, no explanation, just a key. I picked it up. It felt cold and solid in my palm, a question mark cast in metal, a key to a house that wasn't mine, on land that was lost. It was, as Mrs. Gable had said, worthless, a key to nothing. But as I closed my fingers around it, a strange, defiant thought flickered through my mind. It was the only thing they had left me, a worthless deed and a key to nowhere. And I decided, in that sterile, airless office, that I was going to see where it led. The bus groaned its way west, a metal whale swimming through an ocean of asphalt and dust. Every dollar I had, save for 50, was gone, traded for this one-way ticket to a town I'd found on a map, a tiny dot named Sparrow Creek, the closest settlement to the land my parents had lost. Mrs. Gable had tried to talk me out of it. "Leo, there's nothing for you there," she'd insisted, her voice laced with genuine concern for the first time I could remember. The transitional. Housing is here. The job programs are here. Don't go chasing ghosts. It's a waste of what little you have. But I wasn't chasing ghosts. I was chasing a story, my story. For 18 years, my life had been written by other people, by caseworkers, by judges, by the state. The narrative was simple. I was an orphan, a product of misfortune, a boy with no inheritance and no foundation. And for 18 years, I had accepted it. But that deed, that key, they were a loose thread, and I had to pull on it, even if the whole thing unraveled into nothing. The city bled into suburbs, then suburbs into farmland, and finally, the farmland gave way to the high desert of Cinder County. The landscape grew stark and beautiful, a canvas of sagebrush, red rock, and a sky so vast it felt like it could swallow you whole. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the window, watching the world scroll by. Other passengers slept, listened to music, talked quietly on their phones. They were all going somewhere, to a job, to a family, to a life. I was going to a foreclosure. It felt both deeply pathetic and strangely noble, like a knight embarking on a quest for a broken sword. The $250 from the state felt like a pittance, an insult. It was meant to be a bridge to a new life, but it was barely enough to get me to the site of my family's greatest failure. The irony was so thick I could taste it, metallic and bitter like old blood. I thought about my parents. The memories were patchy, dreamlike. I remembered my father's laugh, a loud, booming sound that made his whole body shake. I remembered the scent of my mother's hair, like cinnamon and rain. I remembered holding both their hands as we walked through a park, my small body swinging between them like a pendulum. But the details were fuzzy, eroded by time and the well-meaning but persistent efforts of therapists who wanted me to process and move on. They wanted me to build a future, but how could I build anything without a foundation? All I had was a hole, a space where my past was supposed to be. Maybe, just maybe, Sparrow Creek was the edge of that hole. Maybe if I stood there, I could finally see how deep it went. The bus eventually pulled into Sparrow Creek. It wasn't so much a town as a suggestion of one. A single main street with a gas station, a diner with a flickering neon sign, a boarded-up movie theater, and a handful of other buildings hunkered down against the wind. It was a place that time seemed to be actively forgetting. I stepped off the bus, my backpack slung over one shoulder, the cardboard box under my arm. The air was thin and smelled of dust and pine. A pickup truck idled by the curb, an old man with a face like a dried apple behind the wheel. He looked me over, his eyes lingering on the box. "You new in town, kid?" he asked, his voice a gravelly rasp. "Or just passing through?" "I'm not sure yet," I said honestly. "I'm looking for a place." "Sparrow Creek Ranch." The old man's eyebrows shot up. He chewed on a toothpick for a moment, studying me. "That place? Ain't nobody been out there in, must be close to 20 years. Place is a wreck. Fell down more than it's standing." He squinted at me. "You family of the Hales?" The sound of my own name, spoken by a stranger in this forgotten town, sent a jolt through me. "They were my parents," I said. The man's expression softened. He nodded slowly. "I remember them. Good people. Came out here with big dreams. Shame what happened." He sighed, a puff of dusty air. "Tragedy. The whole town felt it." He gestured to the passenger seat. "It's 5 miles out of town. Roads ain't marked. Hop in. I'll take you." His name was Gus, and he didn't talk much on the drive. He just pointed out landmarks, a lightning-scarred juniper, a dry riverbed, a distant mesa that looked like a sleeping giant. The paved road turned to gravel, and the gravel turned to a rutted dirt track. Finally, he pulled over. "This is it," he said, pointing toward a rickety barbed wire fence and a sagging wooden gate. "Far as I can take you. The rest of the way you walk." Beyond the gate, a barely there path snaked through the sagebrush toward a collection of buildings that looked like they were slowly melting back into the earth. The main house had a sway-backed roof. The barn was missing half its walls, and a few smaller outbuildings listed at weary angles. "County took it for taxes," Gus said, echoing Mrs. Gable. "Been sitting ever since. Vultures picked it clean years ago." He looked at me, his eyes kind. "You got a place to stay tonight, son?" I shook my head. "I'll be all right," I lied. He didn't look convinced, but he didn't press it. He just gave me a sad, knowing look, wished me luck, and drove away, leaving me in a cloud of dust and a profound, ringing silence. I was alone, standing at the edge of my inheritance, of ruin. I pushed open the gate, the rusted hinges groaning in protest, and took my first step onto the land that had broken my parents. The silence was the first thing that truly hit me. It wasn't empty silence. It was heavy, weighted with the sound of the wind whispering through the dry grass and the distant caw of a raven. The air was cold, carrying the sharp bite of the coming evening. I walked up the overgrown path, my sneakers crunching on gravel and weeds. The house loomed larger, and Gus hadn't been exaggerating. It was a skeleton. Windows were shattered, boards were missing from the porch, and the front door hung slightly ajar, as if it had given up trying to keep the world out. It looked haunted not by ghosts, but by a deep and abiding sadness. This was the dream my parents had poured their lives into, this collapsing wreck. A bitter wave of disappointment washed over me. What was I even doing here? This wasn't a quest. It was a fool's errand. I had traded the last of my money and a chance at a real start for a front-row seat to my family's failure. Climbed the groaning steps of the porch, my hand instinctively going to my pocket for the rusted key. I didn't need it. I pushed the door and it swung inward with a long, mournful creak. The inside of the house smelled of dust, damp, and the faint, sweet scent of decay. Moonlight streamed through the broken windows, illuminating a scene of absolute desolation. The main room was empty, save for drifts of dirt, cobwebs thick as cotton, and the debris of 100 nesting mice. Someone, just as Gus said, had picked it clean. There was no furniture, no fixtures, nothing but floorboards and framing. In the center of the room was a large stone fireplace, its mouth gaping and black with old soot. I walked through the house, my footsteps echoing in the emptiness. A small kitchen with gaping holes where appliances used to be. 2 small bedrooms, equally bare. In one of them, I saw faint marks on the wall where a child's height had been measured in pencil. My height. A lump formed in my throat. I had lived here. I had slept in this room, and I couldn't remember a single thing about it. As darkness fell completely, the temperature plummeted. I hadn't thought to bring a sleeping bag, let alone food or water. My bravado from the bus ride felt childish and naive now. I was cold, hungry, and standing in the middle of a ruin miles from anywhere. I huddled in a corner of the main room, pulling my thin jacket tight, the cardboard box my only possession. The wind howled outside, rattling the loose boards of the house like a dying man's last breath. I felt a despair so profound it was almost peaceful. This was it. The bottom, the end of the line. I had chased the ghost and found exactly what Mrs. Gable had promised. Nothing. Less than nothing. I had found proof of a failure so complete that nature itself was reclaiming it. I closed my eyes, exhaustion pulling at me like an undertow. I didn't cry. I was too empty even for tears. I just listened to the house breathe its slow, dusty breaths around me and waited for the sun to rise on my first day as a man with no future and no past. I woke up stiff, cold, and with a burning sense of shame. The first light of dawn was painting the dusty air in shades of gray and pink. My stomach growled a hollow, aching complaint. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit here and freeze. My first priority was survival. I needed to find water, and I needed to assess if any part of this wreck could offer better shelter. I left my box in the relative safety of the house and went outside. The morning light was less forgiving than the moonlight. It exposed every flaw, every inch of decay. The barn was even worse up close, its massive roof beams splintered and exposed to the sky. But behind it, there was an old well with a hand pump. I grabbed the handle, my hopes low, and started to pump. For a long moment there was only a dry, rattling gasp. Then a shudder ran through the pipe, and a trickle of rust-colored water sputtered out, slowly clearing until it ran cold and clean. I drank until my stomach ached, the water tasting like life itself. With the immediate threat of dehydration gone, a sliver of my resolve returned. I decided to do a more thorough search of the house. The vultures might have taken everything of value, but maybe they'd missed something small, something personal. I started in the main room, running my hands along the walls, tapping on the floorboards, looking for anything loose or out of place. Nothing. I moved to the kitchen, then to the first bedroom. It was the same story. The place had been stripped bare. Finally, I entered the second bedroom, the one with the pencil marks on the wall. My room. The floor was covered in a thick layer of dust and debris, but as I scuffed my foot near the far wall, I heard a sound that was different from the others. Not a solid thud, but a hollow echo. I dropped to my knees, my heart starting to beat a little faster. I swept the dust away with my hands and saw it. The faint outline of a single floorboard that wasn't quite flush with the others. My fingers scrabbled at the edge. It was stuck fast. I needed a tool, something to pry it up. I remembered Gus mentioning the place was picked clean, but maybe they'd missed the outbuildings. I raced outside, a new energy coursing through me. I went to the nearest shed, a small structure that was little more than a pile of rotting lumber. Inside, there was nothing. Then I went to the larger woodshed, its door hanging from a single hinge. The interior was dark and smelled of oil and rust. In the back corner, half buried under a collapsed section of the roof, was a large, heavy wooden chest. It was rotted and water-damaged, but it was intact. It took all my strength to drag it out into the light. The latch was rusted shut. I found a rock and smashed it, the wood splintering around the corroded metal. I threw open the lid. My heart sank. It was filled with old, rusted tools, a hammer with a broken handle, a saw with missing teeth, a collection of bolts and nails that had fused into a single orange lump. It was just more junk. Defeated, I started to kick through the contents, anger and frustration boiling up in me. And then my foot hit something that wasn't metal. It was soft. I knelt and dug through the rusted mess. Underneath a tangle of chains was a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. My fingers trembled as I unwrapped it. Inside was a book, a thick, leather-bound ledger, its cover embossed with the name Silas Croft. The leather was dry and cracked, but the pages inside were protected. I opened it. The first page was dated 30 years ago. The handwriting was a neat, deliberate cursive. September 10th, it began. The rains came late this year. The creek is running high. Decided to start this journal to keep the silence from getting too loud. A man alone on 500 acres has too much time to think. I flipped through the pages. It was a diary, the diary of the man who had lived here before my parents. My eyes scanned the pages, catching phrases. Mending the north fence, a sick calf, the price of feed. It was the simple, mundane record of a rancher's life. I almost tossed it aside, another piece of useless history, but something made me stop. I turned to the last few entries, my eyes scanning for a familiar name. And then I found it. May 3rd, sold the home quarter to a young couple today, David and Sarah Hale. They have fire in their eyes. They remind me of me and Martha all those years ago. They have no idea what they're getting into, but they have love. Sometimes that's enough. My breath caught in my chest. This was it. This was the beginning of their story. I sat down on the dusty ground, the crumbling ranch forgotten around me, and began to read. The Diary of Silas Croft became my whole world. I sat against the wall of the collapsing woodshed, the sun warming my back, and devoured his words. He wasn't a poet, but his language was clean and strong, rooted in the earth he so clearly loved. He wrote about the sale of the main homestead, the 5 acres with the house and barn that I now occupied, to my parents. He had kept the surrounding acreage for himself, living in a small cabin on the other side of the creek, acting as a quiet, watchful neighbor. October 12th, he wrote, saw David out past sunset, trying to fix the old pump by lantern light. The boys got more grit than sense. Sarah brought him out a thermos of coffee. I watched them from the ridge. They stood there for a long time, just looking at the stars. This land asks for everything you have. I hope they have enough to give. Reading his words, I felt a strange sense of connection, like I was the one on that ridge, watching my own parents. They weren't just names on a deed anymore. They were David and Sarah, a young couple with fire in their eyes, trying to fix a pump under a vast, starry sky. Silas's entries painted a picture of their first year. It was a litany of struggles, a harsh winter, a leaky roof, the well running dry. But it was also a story of small triumphs. The first successful vegetable garden, the day David finally got the old tractor running, the birth of their son, my birth. July 2nd, Silas wrote, Sarah had the baby last night, a boy. They're going to name him Leo. David came over this morning looking 10 feet tall and scared to death all at once. He said holding that baby was the first time he understood what all this work was for. Not for them, for him. I had to stop reading. My eyes were burning. I looked at my own hands, calloused and dirty from the last 24 hours of work. For him, for me. The words echoed in the silent air. All of this, the struggle, the hardship, it had a purpose. and that purpose was me. I continued reading, my hunger forgotten. The tone of the diary began to shift about 2 years into their life on the ranch. The entries grew more sparse, more worried. April 5th. Man in a suit came by today, asked if I was the owner of the Hale property, told him I wasn't. He had a shark's smile, said his company, Westward Horizons Development, was very interested in the land. I told him it wasn't for sale. He just laughed and said everything is for sale eventually. I don't like the feel of this. A few weeks later, another entry. June 21st. David is worried. The same suit, a man named Peterson, has been harassing them, making lowball offers, threatening to use eminent domain, talking about mineral rights. David told him to get off his land. I saw the man's car drive away. He didn't look like a man who gives up easily. My blood ran cold. Westward Horizons Development. An antagonistic force not of nature, but of greed. The diary then detailed a campaign of systematic pressure, legal challenges to their water rights, anonymous complaints to the county about code violations. Their small business loan was suddenly called in by the bank under a dubious technicality. Silas wrote about my parents growing more withdrawn, more tired. The fire in their eyes was being replaced by a haunted, hunted look. December 11th, I talked to Sarah today. She was crying. She said they were drowning in legal fees. She said they were afraid of losing everything. But then she squared her shoulders and said they would never let the vultures get this land. She said it was Leo's inheritance, and they would protect it no matter what. We talked for a long time. We made a plan, a desperate one, a fail-safe. A fail-safe? A plan. My mind raced back to the hollow floorboard in my old bedroom, to the lockbox I couldn't open. The diary wasn't just a story, it was a map. I flipped forward, searching for another clue, and there it was, in one of the last entries Silas ever wrote, dated just a month before the accident. February 16th. We did it tonight. We put the package away. David said it felt like burying a part of themselves, but it was the only way to protect the boy. Sarah chose the spot, under the hearthstone where the first fire was lit, a foundation for a foundation. If things go wrong, if we can't see this through, the truth will be waiting there. The key to the box is with the key to the house. I stopped. The key to the house. I scrambled for the box Mrs. Gable had given me, but the rusted skeleton key was the only one in there. It didn't make sense. Then I read the line again. The key to the box is with the key to the house. Not the same key. With it. And then I knew. I had to go back to the beginning. Before I do, I just want to pause for a second and talk to you. If you've made it this far into the story, something in it must be resonating. Maybe it's the feeling of being lost, or the hope of finding something that gives your life meaning. We all have a story about what we've inherited, not just money or property, but burdens, questions, or strengths we didn't know we had. This channel is a place for those stories. It's built on the idea that sharing our journey helps us realize we're not walking it alone. So if you feel that connection, hit that subscribe button. Become part of this community. Because what I found next wasn't just about my past. It was about the choice we all have to make between the easy story someone else writes for us and the harder, truer story we have to dig up for ourselves. Now, let's get back to that fireplace. My heart was a drum against my ribs as I scrambled back into the cold, dark house. The fireplace. Under the hearthstone where the first fire was lit. The hearth was made of large, flat river stones sealed with crumbling mortar. Which one was it? They all looked the same. I ran my hands over them, feeling for any looseness, any seam that was wider than the others. Nothing. I thought about Silas's words. A foundation for a foundation. It had to be the cornerstone, the main support. I focused on the largest central stone right at the front. I tried to wedge my fingers under it, but the fit was too tight. I needed a tool, a pry bar. I raced back to the woodshed, to the chest of rusted tools I had dismissed as junk. I dug through them frantically, my hands getting covered in grease and rust. And there, at the bottom, was a short, heavy crowbar. It was pitted and orange, but it was solid. I ran back to the fireplace and wedged the tip of the crowbar into the seam beside the large hearthstone. I put all my weight on it. The old mortar groaned, then cracked. Dust puffed into the air. I pushed harder, my muscles straining. With a sudden, grating crack, the stone shifted. I worked the crowbar around to the other side and pried again. Slowly, agonizingly, the heavy stone lifted. I slid it aside. Beneath it was a hollowed-out space, a dark, rectangular cavity, and inside, nestled in the dirt, was a small metal lockbox. It was the one I had imagined, the one from Silas's diary. It was heavy, solid, and sealed tight. I lifted it out. It was cold to the touch. The keyhole was small and intricate. My rusted skeleton key wouldn't fit. I already knew that. My gaze fell back into the hollow space. Silas's words echoed in my head. The key to the box is with the key to the house. But there was nothing else there. Just dirt. Disappointment, sharp and sickening, hit me. Had I misunderstood? Was the diary wrong? Was I just a fool chasing shadows in a dead man's journal? I ran my fingers through the loose soil at the bottom of the cavity, hope draining out of me. And then I felt it. Something small, hard, and metallic. I dug frantically, my fingers closing around a thin, cold object. I pulled it out and held it up to the sliver of light coming through a grimy window. It was another key, but this one was tiny, intricate, and made of brass. It was attached by a thin, rotted leather cord to the big, rusted iron key, the key to the front door, the one I'd had all along. They had been tied together. The cord must have rotted away, leaving the big key in the velvet box and letting the small one fall into the dirt when my parents' effects were gathered. With the key to the house. They were literally bound together. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the lockbox steady. I inserted the small brass key into the lock. It slid in perfectly. I turned it. There was a faint, satisfying click. The lock had opened. I took a deep breath, feeling like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. This box held the truth Silas had written about. It held the fail-safe. It held the real story of my parents' failure or their sacrifice. I lifted the lid. The inside was lined with faded velvet. There was no money, no jewelry. Instead, it was filled with paper. On top was a stack of letters tied with a blue ribbon, written in a familiar, elegant script I recognized from a birthday card I still had. My mother's handwriting. Beneath the letters was a thick, formal-looking document, its cover bearing the logo of a geology and surveying company, and at the very bottom, tucked into a corner, was a single sealed envelope with one word on it. Leo. My name. I picked up the stack of letters first. The top one was addressed to Silas. I untied the ribbon, my fingers fumbling, and began to read. The first letter from my mother, Sarah, to Silas was dated a week after the man in the suit, Peterson, had first appeared. Dear Silas, it began, I hope this letter finds you well. David and I are writing because we don't know who else to turn to. You were right to be suspicious of that man. He represents a company called Westward Horizons Development, and they want our land. They know, Silas. They somehow know what's underneath it. My brow furrowed. What was underneath it? I put the letter down and picked up the thick document from the geology company. The report was dated 6 months before the letter. It was a comprehensive geological survey of the 5-acre Sparrow Creek Ranch property. I flipped through pages of technical data, charts, and maps, my eyes scanning for a summary. I found it on the last page. Conclusion: the subterranean aquifer located beneath the subject property contains water of exceptional purity with a unique mineral composition. Furthermore, preliminary core samples indicate a significant deposit of high-grade lithium ore concentrated in the northwest quadrant of the parcel. The estimated market value of these mineral rights is substantial. Lithium, a word I knew from science class and articles about batteries and electric cars, a word worth a fortune. My parents hadn't bought a worthless piece of land. They had, by sheer luck, bought a gold mine or a lithium mine. I dropped the report and picked up the letter again, reading with new horrified understanding. They offered us a pittance, Silas, my mother wrote, a fraction of what it's worth. When we refused, the threats began. Not outright threats, but the kind lawyers make. They're challenging our water rights, filing frivolous claims, trying to bleed us dry. David thinks they're pressuring the bank. We're scared. But this land is everything we have. It's Leo's future. We will not let them steal it. I read through the letters one by one. They were a devastating chronicle of a family under siege. Each letter was more desperate than the last. They detailed the mounting legal bills, the endless court dates in a town 2 hours away, the constant grinding stress. Westward Horizons was an octopus, its tentacles reaching into every aspect of their lives, squeezing the hope out of them. They were being systematically dismantled by a faceless corporation with infinite resources. Then I came to a letter that described the failsafe Silas had mentioned in his diary. Silas, my mother wrote, your idea is terrifying. To intentionally default, to let the county foreclose. It feels like admitting defeat, like giving up everything we've worked for. But you're right, it's the only way. Their primary claim is through the bank that holds our business loan. If we let that specific debt go into default, it triggers the foreclosure. But your lawyer friend says it also creates a title so messy, so legally contaminated with liens and conflicting claims, that Westward won't be able to touch it. A 20-year snarl of red tape. 20 years. By then, Leo will be a man. He'll be old enough to understand, old enough to fight. It's a poison pill, just like you said. We lose the land to save it. My vision blurred. The foreclosure wasn't a failure, it was a shield. The story I had been told my entire life, that my parents were irresponsible, that they had failed, that they had left me with nothing but debt, was a lie. It was a lie they had created. They had sacrificed their reputation, their dream, and, ultimately, their lives, to wrap the land in a legal briar patch that would protect it until I was old enough to claim it. The final letter to Silas was chilling. It's getting worse. We're being followed. Last night someone tampered with the brakes on our truck. David fixed it, but we know it was a message. They're getting impatient. We don't think we have much time. We're preparing the box for Leo. If the worst happens, you know what to do. You are the keeper of the story, old friend. Tell our son we loved him. Tell him we're sorry we couldn't be there to see him grow. Tell him to be strong. The letter was dated 2 days before the car accident. The accident. The black ice, the sharp curve. It wasn't an accident. It was murder, disguised as misfortune. They had been silenced. I sat there in the dusty, silent house. The letters spread around me, and I finally cried. I cried for the 7-year-old boy who thought he'd been abandoned. I cried for the teenager who grew up believing he came from nothing. I cried for my parents, David and Sarah, who weren't failures but heroes who had fought a war I never knew existed, and I cried for the terrible, beautiful, and impossibly heavy truth they had left for me to find. After a long time, my tears subsided, replaced by a cold, hard anger. I reached for the last envelope, the one with my name on it. It was time to hear from them, myself. The envelope was thick, the paper softened by 2 decades of waiting. My name, Leo, was written in my mother's hand. I broke the seal with a trembling finger. Inside were several folded pages, and behind them, More legal documents. I unfolded the letter first. It was a single sheet, filled with two different styles of handwriting, my mother's elegant script and my father's blocky, forceful print. They had written it together. "Our dearest Leo," it began in my mother's hand. "If you are reading this, it means we are not there with you, and for that we are more sorry than words can ever say. Please know, whatever you have been told, that we never would have left you by choice. You were and are the most important thing in our lives, our sun, our moon, our stars." My father's handwriting took over. "There's so much we need to tell you, son. Things you need to understand. This land, this place, it's special. Not just because it's beautiful, but because of what's in it. There's a treasure here, Leo, but treasures attract dragons. We've been fighting a dragon called Westward Horizons. They want to strip this land, poison the water, and take everything. We couldn't let that happen. This place isn't just a resource to be exploited. It's your legacy, a place to put down roots." My mother's writing returned. "We had to make a terrible choice. To protect the land for you, we had to appear to lose it. The foreclosure, the debt. It was all a lie, Leo, a shield, a legal labyrinth designed by our dear friend Silas to keep the land safe for 20 years. We hoped we would be here to explain it all to you on your 18th birthday. We hoped we could fight this battle alongside you. Life, it seems, had other plans." Her handwriting wavered slightly, a smudge of ink like a dried tear. "We have left you with a burden, we know that. We have left you with a fight, and we have left you with a choice." I put the letter down and looked at the other documents that had been in the envelope. One was a copy of the original geological survey. The other was a thick, multi-page contract. The letterhead read, "Westward Horizons Development." It was a settlement and acquisition offer. It was addressed to the heirs of David and Sarah Hale, and was dated 6 months after their deaths. It offered a one-time payment of $300,000 in exchange for signing over all rights and claims to the Sparrow Creek property, effectively clearing the title for them to take ownership. A clause stated the offer was standing and irrevocable, valid upon the heir reaching the age of legal majority. $300,000. To a kid who had nothing, it was a fortune. It was a ticket out. A new life, free and clear. It was everything I had ever dreamed of. I picked up the letter again, my father's words stark on the page. "Leo, the bastards will try to buy you out. They're patient. They'll wait 20 years. They'll offer you a sum of money that will seem like all the riches in the world. And it is your right to take it. You could walk away from this place, from this fight, and never look back. No one would blame you. You have been through enough. Your mother and I would not blame you. We just want you to be safe and happy." The final paragraph was my mother's. "But we also want you to know what you would be giving up. Not just the money from the minerals, which is far more than they will ever offer you. You would be giving up this place, this home. You would be letting the dragon win. In this box, Silas has included the name of a lawyer in town, a man named Arthur Harrison. He is young, but his father was Silas's friend, and he knows the whole story. He can tell you what a real fight would look like. It will be hard. It may seem impossible, but you are our son. You have our strength in you and our love. The choice, my darling boy, is yours. To sell the past or to fight for the future. Whatever you decide, know that we love you always and forever." I folded the letter, my hand steady now. $300,000. The words pulsed in my mind. It was a clean break, an escape. I could go to college, buy a car, get an apartment. I could be normal. All I had to do was sign a piece of paper and let my parents' sacrifice be for nothing. Let their memory be that of failure. Let the dragon win. Or I could fight. I could stay here in this ruin and take on a multi-million-dollar corporation with nothing but a small-town lawyer and a story held in a dead man's diary. It was an insane choice. It was no choice at all. I stood up and walked out of the house, into the bright, cold sunlight. I looked out over the land, my land, and for the first time I didn't see a ruin. I saw a battlefield, and I knew which side I was on. The next morning I walked the 5 miles back into Sparrow Creek. The town looked different now. It wasn't just a forgotten speck on a map. It was the home of Silas Croft, the place where my parents had made their last stand. It was the only place I had allies, even if they didn't know it yet. I found the law office of Arthur Harrison on a quiet side street. It was a small, unassuming brick building with a neatly painted sign. I pushed open the door. A young man, probably in his early 30s, with kind eyes and a slightly rumpled suit, looked up from his desk. "Can I help you?" he asked. "Are you Arthur Harrison?" I asked, my voice hoarse. He nodded. "I am." I stepped forward and placed the metal lockbox on his desk. "My name is Leo Hale," I said. "I believe you've been expecting me." Arthur Harrison stared at the box, then at me, and a slow look of dawning comprehension spread across his face. He stood up and extended a hand. "Leo," he said, his voice full of a strange reverence. Yes, my father told me this day might come. He and Silas Croft, they set this up a long time ago. Please sit down." He spent the next 2 hours with me. I told him everything, from my 18th birthday to finding the diary and the letters. He listened patiently, nodding, his expression growing more serious with every word. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on the Westward Horizon settlement offer sitting on his desk. $300,000, he said softly. "It's a lot of money, Leo. It's an easy way out." "I'm not taking it," I said, the words coming out with more certainty than I had ever felt about anything in my life. A slow smile spread across Arthur's face. "Good," he said, "because it's an insulting offer. I've had my father's files on this for years. I've done my own research on the sly. Based on current market values for that lithium deposit, this land isn't worth millions. It's worth tens of millions, maybe more." He leaned forward, his eyes alight with a fighter's fire. "They murdered your parents, Leo. They buried the story and waited you out, assuming you'd be a broken kid they could buy off cheap. Are you going to let them be right?" "No," I said. "I'm going to fight them." "It won't be easy," Arthur warned. "They will have a team of corporate lawyers who will try to bury us in motions and delays. It will take time. It will take money, though I'll work on contingency. It means you'll have to live out there on that land as a resident to establish standing. It means living rough for a while." "I can do that," I said, thinking of the cold, clean water from the well and the solid feel of the crowbar in my hand. "I can work." He nodded, a look of respect in his eyes. "My father and Silas created a brilliant legal maze. The title is a mess, but it's a mess that favors you if you know how to navigate it. The foreclosure was on a secondary lien, not the primary mortgage, which your parents had paid off with an inheritance from your grandmother right before the trouble started. That's our anchor. The county's claim is weak. Westward's claim is non-existent until you sign it over. We have a path, Leo. It's a narrow one, and it's uphill all the way, but it's there." That day, I walked out of Arthur Harrison's office not as an orphan, but as a plaintiff. I went to the town's small grocery store and spent my last $50 on bread, canned beans, peanut butter, a box of nails, and a hammer that felt solid and real in my hand. When I walked back to the ranch that evening, I didn't feel the chill of the coming night. I felt a fire in my belly. The next day, I started to work. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was building. I started with the porch, prying up the rotted boards and replacing them with salvageable ones I found in the collapsing barn. I found an old wood-burning stove in one of the sheds, and with the help of a book from the town library, I cleaned it, patched it, and installed it in the main room's fireplace. That night, for the first time, the house was filled with warmth and the flickering, cheerful light of a fire. I was no longer a squatter in a ruin. I was home. Weeks turned into months. The legal battle began, just as Arthur had predicted. A flood of paperwork from Westward's lawyers, but Arthur met every challenge, his responses calm and methodical. Meanwhile, I worked on the house. I patched the roof. I found old window frames in the barn, and with glass from the town hardware store, I began to replace the shattered panes. The hardware store owner, a gruff man named Mel, started giving me discounts. "Saw you out at the old Hale place," he'd grumbled. "Good to see someone trying to bring it back." The waitress at the diner, a woman named Clara, would pack me extra food when I came in for a cheap meal. "For later," she'd say with a wink. Gus, the old man who had given me a ride, would drop off firewood sometimes. No one spoke of the lawsuit. No one asked about my parents. But in their own quiet way, the people of Sparrow Creek were closing ranks around me. They were becoming my community. One afternoon, I was fixing the fence along the property line when a sleek black car pulled up on the dirt road. A man in an expensive suit got out. It was Peterson, the shark from Silas's diary, older now, his hair gray, but his smile just as predatory. "Leo Hale," he said, not offering a hand. "I'm here to save you a lot of time and trouble. My company is prepared to increase our offer. $500,000. Sign the papers, and you can be on a beach somewhere by next week." I didn't say a word. I just looked at him, then picked up my hammer and drove a nail into a fence post with a single solid stroke. I turned back to him. "This land is not for sale," I said. His smile vanished. He stared at me for a long moment, then got back in his car and drove away. I watched him go, and I knew this was far from over, but I also knew with a certainty that reached down into my bones that I would not be moved. It's been a year now since I first set foot on this land. The legal battle rages on, a slow, grinding war of attrition fought in courtrooms I've never seen. Westward Horizons has tried everything to have the case dismissed, but Arthur has held the line. He says we're making progress. He says they're getting nervous. But the victory isn't in the courtroom, not yet. The victory is here in the life I am building. The house is no longer a ruin. It's a home. The roof is sound, the windows are whole, and smoke rises from the chimney every night. I've cleared a field for a garden, just like my mother did. I've even started to repair the old barn, dreaming of one day having a few animals, just like Silas. I am not rich. Most days I am bone-tired, but I am not the same lost boy who stepped off that bus with a cardboard box and a heart full of nothing. My inheritance, I've come to understand, was never about the lithium in the ground or the money it might bring. My parents didn't leave me a fortune. They left me a choice. They left me a story of defiance. They left me a legacy of love so fierce it was willing to disguise itself as failure to survive. They taught me that home isn't just a place you are given. It's a place you fight for, a place you build, a place you choose. Every nail I hammer, every board I replace is a testament to their sacrifice. I am finishing the work they started. I am living the life they died to protect. Sometimes, at night, I sit on the porch I rebuilt with my own 2 hands, and I look up at the same stars they once watched. I feel them here, not as ghosts, but as a quiet strength inside me. The land holds their story, and now it holds mine too. This journey started with a lie, that I was left with nothing. But the truth is I was left with everything that matters. A purpose, a connection, a home. and a fight worth fighting. This place, Sparrow Creek Ranch, is no longer a symbol of what I lost. It is the foundation of everything I am building, and that, I now know, is the greatest inheritance of all. So I want to ask you, what is the story you've inherited? What lies have you been told about your own past? And what truths are waiting for you to dig them up? Your inheritance might not be a piece of land or a hidden box. It might be a strength you didn't know you had, a talent you were told was worthless, or a love you thought was lost. I want you to share it in the comments below. Let's fill this space with the real stories, the ones that matter. And if you believe in the power of these stories, in the fight for truth and the search for home, then please subscribe to the channel. Let's continue to find these hidden legacies together, because your story matters, and you are not alone in your fight.